Hello, today is Wednesday, August 5th, and welcome to episode 485 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI fellow Jessica Jones, and I'm joined today by NSI Advisory Board member Les Munson, who is representing the state of Vermont today, and NSI Senior Fellow Bishop Garrison. All right. Today, we're talking about a story some of us might have missed. Taiwan held a recall election just a few days ago that was aimed at ousting KMT legislators. And it was sparked by growing frustrations over kind of legislative obstruction and inactivity, some accusations of pro China collusion, and those really wishing to help out the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP, to gain control of a gridlocked parliament. Instead, though, what happened was every KMT lawmaker actually stayed elected, stayed on the ballot. They survived. No one was ousted. Kind of leaves the Taiwan legislature in the exact same position they were before the recall election. And the President Lai is probably not that happy that he doesn't have a legislative majority, and a little egg on his face as well. The recall is one of the largest of its kind in Taiwan's history, part protest, part power struggle. And it has ripple effects outside of the island. Of course, it comes at a moment where we're talking about U.S.-Taiwan defense strategy. President Trump has been putting pressure for Taiwan to increase its defense spending, and so all of these domestic politics, they matter a lot potentially. Okay, so Bishop, I'm going to turn first to you. Can you tell us a little bit about the implications of this recall election and what's going on? Where do we stand right now when it comes to U.S.-Taiwan relations?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one is it's a little bit unpredictable, and I'll leave it to Les to speak a little bit more about the history here. But a large concern right now is just with the KMT's ability to potentially block defense spending for Taiwan. We don't know how others, both within the region and then, frankly, the United States, are going to react to that should it happen. We've made great strides of recent years with Taiwan and trying to help push them towards a true democracy. But this is going to throw kind of a wrench into the situation, and we just don't fully understand it. And there's a concern that it can be played overly played either way, whether you're supportive of the DPP and what they're trying to accomplish, or whether our adversaries are looking at this from, hey, maybe China does have more influence than the United States and its allies truly anticipated. This could potentially have ramifications. It could have economic ramifications as well. As you look at a lot of technologies, the way things are driven right now, a lot of the investment and concerns about how we can continue to do business there. When you talk about chip manufacturers or other issues, this could really play into people becoming a bit more risk adverse and looking for alternatives to doing business there. All of that said, I think the smoke needs to clear on this a bit. We need to remember President Lai actually only received about 40% of the vote whenever he ran, and that was viewed from by Chinese supporters as maybe there was still opportunity for engagement here, and potentially maybe that is the case. But we need to let this play out a little bit more, I think.
Les, what does this say about what's going on domestically in Taiwan, the results of this recall election? And I will note we have a few more legislature lawmakers, 7 more up on the chopping block next month as well as part of another recall vote. What do you make of all of this? What is Vermont? What does Vermont think of this?
I think Vermont, which is a little more staid, a little more buttoned down, a little more kind of preppy approach, if you will, skeptical of the drama. A lot of stuff going on in Taiwan. They've always had a rambunctious political system since they adopted this wacky democracy thing that we've been advocating. They like to fight on the floor of their assembly, like fisticuffs, not just arguments. And notably, the KMT was the party that opposed the Chinese Communist Party way back in the 30s and 40s and 50s. So they were the original kind of, even though they were communist, they were anti-bad communist, and they were kind of our communist. Now they're again the bad guy. I think this is all part of the wonder of democracy and seeing how things play out. It's very entertaining, a lot of drama, a lot of showmanship happening here. It is important. Weirdly, Taiwan has been on the back burner for U.S. attention for the last 7 months somehow, even though it's critically important to our position in the Indo-Pacific. As Bishop was saying, the computer chips issue, hugely important. TSMC, the big Taiwan company, biggest manufacturer of a lot of important computer chips in the world. They just pushed out some people for spying on them. There's a lot going on in Taiwan, positioning between China and the US. China has huge links into Taiwan. So do we. At the same time, all this is happening, there's a lot of expectation that President Trump and President Xi Jinping of China are going to cut some sort of big trade deal in the next month or two. That's been talked about by really smart people. This whole situation is kind of a boiling cauldron of intrigue and politics and fun stuff. And who knows what happens next? It's not inconceivable to me that this next round of elections produces a startlingly different result, because I think things are just chaotic. And part of it, and sorry for going on for so long here, Jones. Maybe it's the Vermont air. I'm getting a lot of oxygen here.
It,
Uh,
it makes you
the
talkative. Keep
the
you
other
up there.
the other really interesting thing is, Trump doesn't really have a strategy except for this tough love on Taiwan. You got to spend more on defense, do more to help yourself, which is a very good thing, by the way. But he doesn't really have a strategy that's been articulated. Joe Biden had kind of this strategic ambiguity thing, which I think is a very sensible policy. No one really knows what Trump has. I don't think Trump knows what he has. And so there's this chaos element that puts, and a very aggressive president in Trump, who is saying things all the time about a number of issues, puts a ton of pressure on a, relatively small political system like Taiwan's. And so I think a lot of the drama we're seeing is actually driven by decisions made in Washington, things said by Trump, things said by some of the people who work for him, even members of Congress on this. There's a whole episode of whether President Lai was going to come to the U.S. or not a couple of weeks ago. There's just a lot of stuff going on, and I think a lot of folks are reacting in the moment. It's hard to read too much into these individual things. You got to look at kind of the longer trend here, which is things are changing. The U.S. remains committed to Taiwan, but there could be a big deal with China in the offing. We'll see how serious that is. I just think it's a really interesting time to be paying attention. We should be paying more attention to what's going on in
Well,
Taiwan.
what's interesting, Les, to your point, is the Trump administration's pressure on Taiwan to increase defense spending is clear, and how that may have played out as in their domestic politics, but for all the comments and statements, kind of tweets or that President Trump has put out. To your point, though, talking about U.S. commitment to Taiwan, we haven't seen any kind of big statement, right?
No.
We haven't. We've got the Middle East, we've got Ukraine, Russia, we've got a lot of the rest of the world covered, but we really don't have the Indo-Pacific covered, right? And so it's interesting. Is it strategic silence? Who knows? But it's good that we haven't heard anything.
So
Strategic
to that point,
chaos.
though, the biggest thing that we need for the government not to do right now, for the administration not to do, is overreact to this and come out with some type of statement and push a little too hard that gets China in some type of reactionary stance.
See, I don't have a fear that would happen. I think we're waiting to see that China deal that Les has brought up. So
I'm not disagreeing on it. I just said let's hope that's the case. Let's hope.
Awesome. That's a wrap. Thanks so much to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI team for the help in producing today's episode. Join us on Friday, August 8th for another episode of Fault Lines, NSI's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Check us out on YouTube. You can see Les's Vermont's cabin action, if you will. And if you like what you maybe next episode we'll get to see the vacuums that are
Get the
littered.
lake in the background next time. Yeah.
Check out our channel. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, or subscribe.